Hello and welcome back to another episode of Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 3, Night of the Quinks on Nyxus Gaming. We are here for another lovely little Nyxus guide, the final Nyxus guide in this game, and I've been struggling with how to approach this video a little bit. You see, in the first two games I did guides on all the boomerangs, their effects, and how to unlock them, but this game handles boomerangs a little bit differently. Originally, I was thinking of going over the location of every single Bunyip Stone in the game and all their effects and how they combine with each other and all the different stuff you can do with them, but that is just, I'm gonna be honest, that is a lot of work, and I don't enjoy this game enough to put in that much effort into a guide. I love this series, Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. The third one is a little bit of a black sheep to me. That being said, this video will still cover the very basics, and that's about it. If you have any other questions about them, I encourage you to buy this game and perhaps the first two games in the series, because I like them a lot better, and explore the possibilities yourself. So without ado, let's get a move on. So the reason I say that this game handles boomerangs a lot more differently than the first two games is because, well, you don't get boomerangs, you get chassis, and you start off with this mono chassis here, and you may be noticing that it has a little hole in the middle of it. That is because every chassis in the game just about acts like a normal old boomerang. It basically is the first boomerang that you get in the first two games. All the chassis in the game will act just like that until you put a Bunyip Stone in them. Bunyip Stones bestow various abilities, elemental effects, and powers to your boomerangs, and it's the game's way of basically letting you build your own boomerang and its own effects. That being said, the mono chassis here only has room for one of those stones. Now, you will get other chassis throughout the game that have more slots for more stones, and that being said, we're going to go over how to get the other chassis first. You're going to be buying most of them, all of them but this first one. You'll start with this, and the final one. They are split between two shops. This is New Buramudgee Town, where you basically start the game at after the tutorial, and you can get your next two chassis within the rank shop here.
Hello, my little cub.
You can get the Duo chassis here for 3,000 opals, and you see there it comes with 2 Bunyip Stone slots.
Now you be careful with that.
And you can also get the Lash Chassis for 5,000 opals, and this comes with 3 slots for you. It also, though, has its own little ability that I will show in a second.
Oh, I had my eye on that one.
Now, the Lash Chassis here, with the added effect of having 3 Bunyip Stone slots, also works similarly to how it does in the first two games with the Lasherang. Not only does it have a shorter range on it than every other rang, but it can also be used to latch onto rings like that if you don't miss them. Just like that, so you can swing around and jump from ring to ring anywhere you see them. You will need the Lash Chassis for this effect. Let's go get some more chassis. All of your other chassis, except for one, can be bought here in this shop located in Cassopolis in the second act of the game.
I love that bell.
Now, one thing to note is this shop does contain everything from the previous shop too, so you can buy the Duo chassis and the Lash chassis here, but more importantly, you can buy extra stuff, like the Mega Chassis for 10,000 opals. It lets you use 4 Bunyip Stone slots.
Those Quinkin won't know what hit him. It was your rang.
Obviously, the next step up is the Smash Chassis that has 5 Bunyip Stone slots for 15,000 opals.
You could use that rang to throw at things.
And then you have the chassis with the most slots in the game, the ring chassis, with 6 of them. It costs 20,000 opals.
Sly will be jealous when he sees that.
And there is a bonus one. Speaking of Sly, in the first game, he gives you the Doomerang, which kind of returns in this game as the Doom chassis for 25,000 opals.
Hey, those Quinkin won't know what hit him. It was your ring.
The Doom chassis itself is similar to the Lash Chassis in that it is one of the few chassis in the game that has its own effect other than just inserting stones into it. It works exactly like the previous 2 games, where if you throw it, you can control wherever it goes in very bad inverted controls, and when it does hit something, it explodes. In this game, though, it's a little bit more useful because you can still throw stones into it. It has 4 stone slots for you to use. The final chassis that you are not able to buy in any of the shops is another unique one. It is one of, I guess, the 2 that you have to require throughout the story of the game, the first one being the mono chassis that you start with. This is the Shadow chassis. Now, this is required at the end of the game in order to defeat the final boss. And it is talked about like it is the most powerful chassis that you can get because it's the only thing that can damage the final boss. But in reality, it's kind of disappointing because this thing can't take any Bunyip Stones. Not a single one except for 3 Shadow Stones that are also story related and can only go in this thing. So you can't put any elemental effects in this thing at all. You can't turn it into a Megarang, a Warperang. You can't do anything. You just get the Shadow Stones, put them in, and you fight the final boss with it. It's a little disappointing, but it is a chassis available in the game, so I wanted to make note of it. Now that we have all of the chassis available to us, let's start talking about the Bunyip Stones. These are what you insert into all your chassis to build your desired rang and get your desired effects. They can be found all around the game as simple collectibles that you can grab, though be aware that they do not track in the level collectible screen, and you have no way of knowing if you've grabbed them all unless you absolutely scour the level. They can also be given as mission rewards when you complete all the story missions of the game. But more importantly, if you're ever missing 1 or 2 stone that you want for your build, you can buy them from the 2 rank shops. Now, only the Fire, Water, Mega, and Ultra Stones are available at the shop here in Buramudgee, but all the stones, except for the Shadow Stones, of course, are available in the shop at Cassopolis. The first Bunyip Stone we'll be going over is the Fire Stone, and it is probably the most simplistic one. You can see here I got my first 3 ranks laid out with all Fire Stones, so we can look over the effects of just 1, 2, and then 3. Just about all of the stones you use are going to have an additive effect up to 3 based on how many you use. If you have a single Fire Stone equipped into a chassis, then it just does some basic fire damage when it hits an enemy. If you equip 2, however, you get a ring of fire that pops out whenever you hit that enemy. And I do believe it does more damage for having 2 of them. 3 of them, when you hit an enemy, I don't think the ring of fire gets that much bigger. It might actually, now that I'm looking at it. But it does definitely do a lot more damage. The Water Stones will have a similar effect to the Fire, where they will grow in damage with every extra Water Stone you put in them, but their main difference is with just 1 Water Stone, you can freeze any enemies that you hit, and then you can just kind of walk up to them and shatter them, just like that. And then, like I said, oh, I guess there is the Ice Wave that you get, similar to the Fire one. I actually was not sure about that one. But I would assume with 3 stones, it's pretty much the same, just an ice wave with extra damage. It's kind of nice that it lets you freeze multiple enemies at once. This one does also have a practical effect to it as well. If you're ever near water, you can use the water stones to make platforms, and I believe with each one, this water might not be deep enough. But this water definitely is. With each added water stone, the platforms that you make within the water out of ice should last longer theoretically. So I am going to make 3 of them here with all 3 levels. And you see that one sank pretty quickly. It looks like they all last about the same amount of time actually. I was wrong on that one. Sue me. Let's move on to the next one. The air stones are gonna be your lightning elements, and unfortunately, unlike the other 2 that we just covered, this one really only has a use for damage. It does have a practical use, which we'll go over in a few seconds, but you just don't really need that practical use. For most of, honestly, the entire franchise, you don't need it. It's very rare that you get to use that effect. But other than that, if you have just 1 stone equipped, you can see they get electrified there a little bit like that. With 2 stones, you're going to call down a lightning bolt and lag out your game a little bit, apparently. And bear with me here, I only have 3 stones, so I'm going to have to change some stuff up here. With all 3 air stones equipped on a chassis, it seems about the same effect-wise, but I know it will do more damage. The other practical effect I was talking about with these air stones is you can use their lightning ability to charge up any generators like this that you might see throughout the game. The problem being is you hardly see these throughout the entire franchise, and they're almost never required to progress the game. They're usually just for a random collectible. So you can just about get away without ever using this. There are a few times, but you won't need it often. You just shock it, and whoa, the generator works, and it usually does something for you. It does different stuff depending on what it's used for. Simple enough. Earth stones are actually really useful, in my opinion, because of their practical effect. We're going to start off by showing that off with these, because I'm here in Buramudgee Town, which is the perfect place to show it. With a single earth stone, you're able to break any cracked walls that you see just like that. It will also allow you to break metal crates, which you cannot do with any other boomerang or stone, I believe. And just for reference, these are the metal crates I'm talking about right here. You can use, say, a mega chassis with no stones equipped, no damage at all, but if you put a single earth stone in, you can then break them and get the goodies inside. As for fighting enemies, of course they're going to do more damage the more stones you have inserted into the chassis. This is with 1 stone, just a simple wallop. If this is 2 stones, you get a little explosion, which I'm sure damages enemies around as well. And then real quick, we're gonna unload that stone from there so we can fit it in here. I was 1 stone short on loading all 3 of these up, sadly. And with 3 stones, maybe that's a bigger explosion. It did seem to have a bigger range on the explosion because it killed the guy back here as well. And it definitely does more damage. As we get past the elemental stones, we'll get to stones that don't necessarily add damage as you add more of them, but they'll add some weird and crazy effects. That being said, the first one we're going over is one of, in my opinion, the most useless effects in the entire franchise. These are Chrono Stones, just like the Chrono Rang in the first 2 games. If you have just 1 of these equipped and you hit an enemy with them, well, I mean, it's It's supposed to slow them down, but it's just one-hitting them. We'll try it on some Quinks, because they can't be one hit, to my knowledge, and they block it. This is going great. Let's try and find an Uber Frill. Alright, here we go. Let's try it on one of these. Clear out the fodder real quick with 1 stone. You can see the effects, and he is going quite a bit slower, so you would wonder, what do 2 stones do? Well, as you can see, it's already lasting a decent bit. I believe all that 2 stones are going to do, it might slow them down even more, but it's just going to last a bit longer. Sorry for the small cut there, but yeah, it's just going to last longer. No real change between adding stones, and yeah, you guys just saw there's not even much use to this. It just slows them down, and it doesn't work on one-hit enemies. It doesn't work on Quinks because they just block the rang. But I'll show 3, I guess. And here is 3 stones added in. Oh, this one practically just freezes. It does just freeze them in place. So yeah, I guess with each added stone, it does slow them down more and more to the point where they just freeze. I don't think the time's even longer on it. I might have that part wrong. I just don't see a real use. I don't think I have ever used the Chrono Stones or the Chrono Rang seriously in any of my playthroughs other than to just try it out and see what it does. It is completely useless in my mind. But don't worry, there are better stones, and we'll go over those next. Warp stones are fun, and there's some stuff that I actually didn't know about them. I guess I've never really cared enough to throw more than 1 warp stone on a rang, because really all you need is 1 to get all the collectibles. You'll find these purple crystals, and with 1 warp stone, you can warp up to them if you aim it right. And like I said, that's all you really need for warp stones throughout the game. But fun fact, if you throw 2 of them onto a boomerang, then you get a little force field for 3 hits. I was told it was 3 hits. Maybe it's like when you're moving around. No, maybe it's, I guess, just as you're standing still, you're kind of invisible like that, and you can't be hit, so that's nice. And the reason that confused me was because I had the effects backwards. 2 stones will turn you invisible like that when you're standing still, and you can see, like, I still have that effect. I'm visible, and then when I stand still, I am invisible. But with the 3 stones, that is when I get the 3-hit force field. And now I am taking damage after that force field runs out. So yeah, just a cool little thing. I never knew about warp stones. I still probably won't use more than 1 though. Speaking of using these stones to get collectibles, the Mega Stones would be your best friend in this matter. Let me just make sure. These are the Mega. No, these are the Ultra Stones. I had a feeling I would mix that up. The Ultra Stones will be your best friends in getting collectibles. With just a 1 stone equipped here, you may not notice much of a difference. But what if I told you there was an invisible box up there? What a single Ultra Stone will do is if you look through Ty's view, you'll get that sonar in the background whenever something invisible is around. And it will be much more visible, so you can hit it and get what you need. Now, platforms can be invisible, crates can, buttons can, so overall it's just a useful thing to have, but I would recommend at least getting 2 of them. Right, that's not going to show up now, so I can't really demonstrate it. Let me find another. Here we go. This is a good example. Like I said, it can, the game can have invisible platforms as well, which I am standing on with just 1 stone. You would have to look through the Ty view button in order to see them, but with 2 stones, they are just automatically visible, which is why I would recommend having at least 2 stones if you're going to use this feature. When you get 3 stones, this becomes even better at hunting down collectibles, because then you'll start to see colored beacons around based on what collectibles are in the area. Now the yellow ones that you see around, actually I'm not really in view of one. I know there are some around here. There's one up there towards the middle of the screen. The yellow beacons are going to be for your picture frames. And that blue beacon is going to be for a chromium orb. Oddly enough, the stones and the bilbies do not seem to have beacons on them. As you can see, 2 of them, one of each, on my screen here. Neither of them have beacons. So it's not perfect at finding collectibles, but it's definitely a big help. Now, finding collectibles isn't the reason you're playing this game and you just want to plow through it as fast as you can, destroying everything in your path, then I would recommend that you find yourself some Mega Stones. These work exactly as the Mega Rangs in the previous 2 games, where just having 1 stone will cause your Rang to lock onto enemies and ricochet between them a little bit. I believe with 1 stone, it's only going to ricochet to 1 extra enemy. It will also auto-lock onto crates as well, keep that in mind. But the more stones you add, the more enemies or crates it's going to ricochet off of. With 2 stones, it'll ricochet. That was very fast, but I think it hit 4 different enemies there. Like I said, that was very fast, but you can see it's hitting more enemies as it goes. Let's check out 3. And you can use it on the Quinks too. It might be better to count the ricochets here, since they won't die in 1 hit. So let's get this group of 3 all together and let her rip. Yeah, it's really hard to count when it hits 2 in between, but I think it went to hitting 2 enemies, to hitting 4, to now ricocheting 6 times, if I'm seeing it right. But it's definitely doing more as you add stones. These next stones, I would say, are also combat focused, and I don't actually need enemies to demonstrate these on, because these are the multi-stones. They don't work necessarily the same as the multi-rang in the previous game. In the previous game, the multi-rang would literally let you throw more than 2 rangs at once. You could just pretty much rapid fire them. In this game, the stones with each added stone just let you throw your rangs faster. So I guess a better example of this would be to show the normal throwing speed here. Kind of slow, leaves you open. If you were to throw just 1 multi-stone on, you can already see the speed difference there. Much faster. Let's try 2 at a time. Even faster. And I don't think I actually had enough stones to fill out this 3rd one, so bear with me real quick as I switch. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Some stones aren't compatible with the Lash Chassis. I'm going to go over all that after we demonstrate the stones. But that's why you've seen me using the Mega Chassis here and there. We're just going to throw 3 multi-stones into this thing. And these things are going lightning fast now. Look at that. Next up are your Zoom Stones, and these basically turn your boomerangs into little sniper boomerangs. With a Zoom Stone, your rang will go much farther than a regular rang, but it will also allow you to zoom in whenever you're aiming in Ty's view. If you were to add a second one, your rang would go even farther than just 1 stone, and I believe you can zoom in even further with Ty's view, so you can only assume what 3 will do. Wow, that goes pretty far. And look at how far you can zoom in. That's right, it's just an additive effect with every stone you get. You zoom in further, and you can throw it further. I personally don't like to use these too much, because all that time it takes for the rangs to fly and come back to you, it just leaves you open, and all you have to defend yourself is your bite attack. So personally, I don't use these too much. And finally, we have the Magnet Stones. Now, these work exactly like you would think they do. With just 1 stone, you can attract opals to you. And you're going to have to take my word for these next 2. Because on all 3 of my save files, I either have pretty much every collectible, or I have no easy way of getting more Magnet Stones. So, I'm just going to do this one by word. With 2 stones, you would be able to attract picture frames to you. And with 3 stones, you can attract other collectibles to you. Now, I believe you do require 3 magnet stones for at least 2 of the collectibles in the game. Other than that, it's just if you're lazy and don't want to run up and grab the collectible. And they are technically stones, so I'll go ahead and mention these as well. I mentioned the Shadow Chassis in the chassis section as being story related and not being able to put in any of the regular stones into it. You can even check here, it has no slots. After you get the Shadow Chassis in the story, you will hunt down 3 unique Shadow Stones that are supposedly put into these rings. And I don't think they serve any purpose to really make this better practically, except they just help you defeat the final boss. It's really not worth mentioning in my opinion, but they are stones, and this is a chassis, so I feel like I must. To close out the video, I will go over a few things that you can't do with the stones. A lot of the stones can't interact with each other that well. I say a lot, it's not really that many. I'll go over what I do know, and quite a few of them can't go in the Lash Chassis. So, one example is if you see here, if I press the right button, none of the elemental stones can be in the same chassis with each other. Otherwise, it will not work. They will cancel each other out, and that red outline means that the effect is not active. You can try any which way you want. You can try air and say earth. It's still going to pop up red. Other than that, I don't really know about any stones that just won't work with each other. I know about a lot more that won't work with the Lash Chassis. So, for example, none of the Chrono Stones will work in the Lash Chassis. Even if you have a stone that will normally work, this combination is not valid, so neither of the effects will work. You can take off the Chrono Stone, and suddenly your Water Stones work. So if you have one thing that isn't working here, it's not going to work. Warp Stones actually will work. I was about to be wrong there. Let's see. I don't think Ultra Stones... I'm just falling all over myself here. It's kind of confusing what does and doesn't work. Mega Stones don't. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, Mega Stones don't. I don't think Multi-Stones do. Zoom Stones don't. And I think Magnet Stones will. Yeah, Magnet Stones will. Really, it's any stone that will extend the range of the Lash Chassis, because the Lash Chassis already has a shorter range than all of the other ones. So if you do a stone that messes with the range or the way it fires off, the direction it goes, then it's not going to work. Those are all the inconsistent setups that I know about. I'm sure there are more, but it's worth mentioning at the very least. That being said, I think we are all done here with this video. I want to bring this up in my last 2 boomerang guides for Ty 1 and Ty 2. I did a tier list at the end, tiering the boomerangs all together. You can go back and watch those if you want. I am not going to do one for these, just because of all the different combinations they could have. Like, I could easily take the ring chassis here, and I could put in a bunch of Mega Stones, so it has that effect. Not an Ultra Stone, a bunch of Mega Stones, and then I could say, I could throw in a couple Earth Stones, that way it explodes when it hits, and then I could throw in a Zoom Stone, and just get a long-reaching, homing explosion ring. And just because of all those combinations, I'm not going to do a tier list for this video. If that's what you're looking forward to, I apologize. But it's going to end here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next week, in 2 weeks, actually, for another Skyrim guide. We are going back to Skyrim. Thank you, and bye-bye.